Hey folks, it is RBB. I wanted to do a little bit of color correction and color grading and making a bright and happy scene look a little spookier. And so we're going to use this image we've used before. Now, I went ahead and did some things ahead of time, and I'm going to show you that version sped up so we don't take a lot of time we've already done before. I tried to speed it up. My screen capture software just threw up all over itself. It's funny. That's a computer phrase. Lots of people use that. Oh, my computer threw up all over itself. Either they have never actually seen that happen, or they're a parent and they know exactly what that's like. Because I took my daughter to a grocery store one day, perfect little demure angel in her car seat, and just spontaneously, she just Vesuvius barfed all over everything. And after we called cleanup on aisle 4, I called an exorcist, and all is well. But that's not the point. So I went ahead and did this off screen, and I'm going to go ahead and show you basically what we did so that you can see it without having to go through the whole process again. Okay. So I made some changes that I knew we needed to make, such as getting rid of Mickey Mouse, and I used the clone stamp tool. We've done this kind of stuff before. So it took me about probably 15 minutes to do this correction, to take, the things out of here that I didn't want. And you'll see we do a little color change and things, but it didn't take forever. But I did, pretty decent job. Certainly would have been good enough. Let's say I wanted to use this image for a background for a fashion shoot, or this is my opening clean plate for a movie or something. It's okay if a couple of pixels are still there, because hopefully whatever I'm creating is interesting enough that people aren't going to be distracted by a couple of strange pixels. So, but I still cleaned it up, pretty well. Like right there, these little pixels would not probably have mattered at full size, but I went ahead and cleaned them up anyway. I got rid of Mickey over in the window, that little reflection, because, don't mess with the railroad or Mickey or Disney. Okay. And then the water was sort of a dead giveaway that this was a still photo. So using the clone stamp and the healing brush tool and the spot healing brush tool, I got rid of the evidence of the flowing water. I also zoomed out a little bit, zoom in, zoom out, look around. I didn't like this sort of patch on the wall, so I used the healing tool and just sort of blended that in. I also used the spot healing tool to get rid of that vent that was bugging me for some reason. And just looking around, did I want to clean up anything else? I think I got rid of a couple of manholes and damaged ground. And then I Bob Ross this lady. If that is not a verb, it should be. Boom, you got Bob Ross. You are a happy little treat. Got rid of that guy. So I think it was pretty cleaned up. That was good enough. But I find those red awnings were a little distracting. So I did go ahead and color correct those, or color change them. So I use the Magic Wand tool, which might not be the best tool for this, but it's one that I'm comfortable with and use a lot because I'm old school like that. So I just kept shift click and getting bunches of areas of red. Then to work non-destructively, I put it on its own adjustment layer, called it awning. I made sure I named it, turned it blue, lowered the saturation. And then you can see that I actually made a fairly crappy selection. So what I'm doing here is I'm going into the alpha channel and my paintbrush on white. So I'm adding to the mask, saying, all right, make sure that all of these pixels here that I'm painting on are included in the turn this blue change. All right, so I just take a little time and paint over these. Things like the white letters, white and black, are generally not affected by hue and saturation change. Well, hue change because they're not colors. So the reason these letters were a little tinted red is because they were surrounded by red. So them being a little blue now is fine. So what's happening when you see me bounce back and forth like that? There's a cool little trick in Photoshop if you want to draw a straight line. If you start with your brush in one spot, click, then move to where you want the end of the line to be, hold shift and click, it'll draw a perfectly straight line. So I do the same thing here to correct this. Rather than trying to draw a straight line, I just went back and forth a couple times with that little trick. And then I moved around and tried to get anywhere that had like a red overspill. Again, not worried about every little pixel. When you're zoomed in really close, you can get kind of pedantic and be like, oh, there's a pixel. But remember, at full size, we're not going to see it. And hopefully our other stuff is that interesting. Now, I see some things I missed, but just calm down. It's okay. It's not going to matter in the end. I went ahead and also chose a soft brush and made sort of a blue glow underneath because it was red before. I did it a little heavy-handed, so you'll see I actually switch back to black and sort of take away from that just a little bit. All right, looked around and decided, hey, that's pretty good. I think that's good enough for government work. Let's move on. So here we are back, basically in real time, and we started out with this image that we had lots of things to fix, and boop, and you gotta say boop, it really makes things work better. And we, of course, changed it to look like this. Okay, so this is our cleaned up plate, and I made sure that I named it cleaned up background, so I didn't just have thousands of background copies. There's my awning right there. Now we want to do something cool with this. This is what the video is really about today. So I want to change out the sky to something spookier and change this to basically make this whole picture look a little creepier. All right, so to do that, what we're going to do is I want to select this sky. So I have my what is this called here? The quick selection tool, which is a brush. Okay, and Photoshop doesn't know that this is clouds and sky and this is building and this is trees. But if you squint, you can see that this white part here, this very light part that is the sky, is significantly different in contrast to everything around it. So Photoshop's not going to have a hard time figuring out, oh, you must want all of this bright stuff. Just like here, it would be like, oh, I'm going to grab all this stuff that is similarly colored and shaded. So I'm going to left click and just drag a little bit, and Photoshop said, boom, I know what you're doing. Okay, and it did a pretty good job. Now, if we zoom in, we'll see that it missed some things, like it cut off the little cupola and stuff here, but that's okay. We're going to fix that. So what I want is, I actually want the inverse of this. Okay, I selected this because it was easiest, but I really want to select the rest of the city. So to do that, I'm going to go to Select and choose Inverse. Now, yes, I know there's a hotkey, but to me, Shift-Control-I is not a hotkey. That's yoga. Any more than 2 buttons, and it's just yoga. So now you can see my marching ants are covering the whole city and not the sky. Okay, and if I click down here on the little Japanese flag looking thing and say, make this a mask, it will keep the whole city and take out that selection. Now here where I missed the cupola, if we were picky about that and we wanted to take time to do this really nicely, this is an alpha channel, right? So it wasn't destructive. I didn't just delete it. I can get a nice small brush. Let's switch to our paintbrush. Nice small brush. And we want to take away from a selection, right? So I'm going to say, hey, don't include this. Let me see if I'm doing that right. Oh, the other way. Include it. So I'm going to use white. If I want to put it in the mask, be happy if I was doing the right thing. If I want it included as white, take away from the mask is black. Okay, what is the dealio? Oh, I'm at 8%. See, I don't mind leaving mistakes in sometimes, because sometimes it's good to see, like, why is something not working? Troubleshoot. Often it is an opacity problem, or you have some tiny thing selected. So if your paintbrush isn't working, you can always hit Control or Command D to see if that's the problem. So I'm just going to paint the cupola back in here. Not actually sure what all it is. So I'm going to actually overpaint a little bit here, make sure I got it all. Oh yeah, there we go. It was much bigger than I thought. It's much bigger. All right, now I've totally colored outside the lines, but I made sure I got all my stuff there. I want to take away from this mask, so I'm going to switch to black. And I could get in here with a sharper brush, you know, with less softness, more hardness, and really clean this up, but we're just going to kind of do this a little bit quicker today. All right, so I am painting in the alpha channel, and I'm painting black to say, this is sky. And if I missed anywhere else, like chunks of blue, things like that, I can get rid of those as well. I am not a big fan of the smooth line that Photoshop tends to do. So if this were me and I was doing this for myself, for, you know, a client or something, I would do what we talked about before and get like a custom brush that just had a couple of little dots, and I would paint into the edges of this foliage so that it wasn't a smooth cut off edge, which is one of those dead Photoshop giveaways, like this right here where there's little bits of blue sticking out. All right, I don't like that, but that would take a little while, and I know some of you guys get kind of fussy after a little bit. So, but yeah, you could clean this up pretty well. Oh, don't do that. Take your time, you know, do it decently, but we're going to call this one close enough. I could be more picky and get in here with a much harder brush and really get close to this edge, but I'm going to try not to be, to do that and be overly picky about it, because that's not the point. Okay, earlier I went ahead and I selected a sky that I thought would be kind of cool, because that would, sort of be the look I'm going for, and I found it on Pexels, of course, and which I always go to for copyright-free images, and I found one that was relatively in the right perspective. Remember to make your sky in the right perspective. If you are looking down a street, your sky is not going to be viewed from straight above. I'm waving my hands above my head like you can tell where I'm looking. So if you can't hear my arms waving, that's what I'm doing. I wave my arms a lot. So this is receding into the distance, and I like that. This was also a gigantic picture, so as we've done in the past, I went up to image and image size and shrunk it down to about 2K, because it's just a tiny part of my picture. So I don't even need the whole picture. I'm going to go ahead and grab my rectangular marquee tool, just grab the sky. I don't need the ocean because that would be weird. Okay, and I'm going to Control or Command C, go back into my colorful city, boop, Control or Command V. Remember, we're pasting and we're not making this a smart object because we don't need to. Now you might say, what the heck's going on over there? Well, let's look and see what's happening. This pasted underneath that awning color change, and so it's affecting everything below it. So we want this to actually go below here. So it's behind the city, okay? There it is. So I'm gonna grab my move tool and I'm gonna move this around until I like what it looks like. So really the picture of that sky is just back there. I don't want it too high, okay? But I can move it around till it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. All right, so it's a pretty big picture, so I got a lot to work with. That's not too bad. We're gonna call, let's see. We just look around, move it around, something cool. That's kind of active, that's kind of neat. We don't want it to be distracting, but we want it to be cool, right? Okay. So I like where it was over here, and we could take too long doing this. So let's call it, boom, there we go. There's our creepy sky. Now you can see close up that we might need to fix our edges a little bit. So we could go in and soften those edges, because right now on those marching ants went from 100 to 0, and it has it's aliasing, okay, it's crunchy, these little bits, and they don't look great. So if we were doing this for big bucks, bags of gold, we would want to go back into this alpha channel and clean up these edges a little bit, but I don't think we're going to take the time to do that. We'll be here all day. Come on, what else have you got to do? Okay. So there we go. That's gorgeous. I'm going to relabel this layer 1 as creepy sky. Get used to naming things. All right. So we're already looking a little bit creepier. So we have corrected our image. We've color corrected our image. And now we've corrected the plate by replacing things like the sky. You want to pay attention to stuff like this right here, because those windows are reflecting that bright blue sky. So we could actually make them part of the mask as well. We could come in here to this alpha channel, zoom in a little bit. I often switch between my mouse and my stylus, depending on how precise I need to be. So sometimes you hear lots of clicking and stuff in the background because I'm switching around. So I could go into this alpha channel right here and include some of this stuff in the mask, even at a slight, get in the right place, there we go. Even at a lower opacity. I don't have to completely, let's see, soft round pressure size. Let's lower the opacity a little bit. So what that's going to do is it's going to take it out of the mix a little bit, okay? So you can see here, let me put it up really all the way up and you can see what I'm going to do. So I'm on my alpha channel. I want to make this part of the sky, so I actually need to be black. And see, what I'm doing here is I'm not erasing it, but I'm making it so it's part of that mask in the background. Okay, now that's obviously way too heavy-handed. I'm actually going to get fancy here. I'm going to use my lasso tool and use the polygonal lasso, and I'm going to click in these corners because I want this to look good. And I'm simply just moving it to the corners and clicking and making a selection that is perfectly shaped. Now, if I want to do all the windows at one time, I simply hold Shift And I can do that to all of these windows. Go away, content bar. All right, so I'm just, again, doing this a little quickly, but by using the polygonal lasso tool, it lets me choose straight lines, basically like little vectors, and I'm just clicking in the corners. I'm holding shift so it adds to the selection. All right, and I'm gonna grab this one down here. It's not great, but we're gonna call it good. All right, and you could be really picky and get every little bit that is reflecting that blue sky, but we're gonna call this one pretty good. All right, so now I'm letting go of shift. I'm done selecting. And now if I paint, I don't have to worry about painting straight lines. So in this alpha channel, painting black, I'm going to switch to my brush. And I'm going to use a pretty low opacity because I don't want it to just blast it away like the windows aren't there. I want it to be a reflection of the window. So I don't want them to be completely gone. Make my brush a little bigger. And remember, I'm painting black, which is adding to the selection. And now it looks more like they're reflecting the sky. What it's actually doing is making these windows semi-transparent and seeing this sky image behind it. I could go over this a couple times because remember it's at 10% until I feel like that has kind of the look. All right, when I'm done, I'm going to Control or Command D and deselect, and that's good. That's a little bit better. That would be one of those like total Photoshop giveaways, like, oh, hello, we're actually reflecting bright blue sky. Okay, so this is color correcting. We have some other things such as these highlights and stuff up here, but you ever had one of those storms that like the sky is really dark, but there's a weird brightness and it's a little creepy? Like, I think we'll go ahead and leave this. So now we want to color grade. We want to change the whole picture. We have basically healed and fixed the plate. So I could take this whole stack here from awnings to, my background copy. Really, we've done this all on 3 layers. And I could put them in a group because I'm done with this. This is basically my color correction thing. So if you want to see this, I shift selected all of these guys and I click on this little folder and I'm going to call this group plate and color cleanup. So just so I know what it is. Okay. So now it just cleaned up my stack a little bit there. There's all my layers. They're in that folder, but it keeps my stack nice and clean. What I have here is the original background and a clean background copy. So if I want to make some changes above this and affecting everything below it, we could do some adjustment layers. Let's give that a try. So I could choose an adjustment layer and let's do hue and saturation. So what I want to do here in hue and saturation is I want to tone this down, but let's do this a couple times. First of all, if you look at this, there's way too much red. If we want this to look creepy and spooky, maybe we're turning this into a zombie movie. I don't find zombies remotely scary, but let's go ahead and change the hue and saturation, but not of the master channel. We're going to change, let's do the reds. And if you wonder what's being affected, you can always like slam up the saturation and you can see what's being affected. Okay, now you can see it's not touching the green or the blue or anything because I'm working on the red channel. So all I'm doing is desaturating the reds a little bit. Okay, just a little bit. Okay, so I'm gonna you need to calm down a little bit. And I think the greens are a little too bright and happy, so we could do that too. Now they could be yellows or greens, let's see. All right, that green's pretty good. So I'm going to desaturate the green. Okay, and I could do these on separate layers. I could do red desaturation, green desaturation, so that it was non-destructive, and I could always turn those on and off, but you can do that if you wish. So there we go. We've desaturated. I'm going to name this one Desat Green and Red. So we know what these layers are doing. That's not too bad. Let's see what else we can do. Looked at our adjustment layers. We could lower exposure. We could change the curves, brightness and contrast. Now here's something that I like to do. I love the bleach bypass look, and you can look up what that is, but it's used a lot in like war films and sci-fi films. And what it does is it crushes the black and white in a scene that makes things much higher contrast. So I'm going to do that with the curves layer. So if I throw down a curves adjustment layer, it's really, even if you don't really understand what the curves are doing, you can just remember this, that right now I am allowed to have from 100% black to 100% white. And you can see that, you know, that I don't have a lot of white in this image. I've got a lot of mid-tones toward darker areas. But if I grab this little marker guy right here and move it to the right, I'm basically saying this is 100% black, lowering the number. So basically, if I move this over, I'm saying if you are, say, 90%, 80%, 75% black or more, slam it down to black. Okay, so I can only be like 75%, otherwise it gets slammed down to black. Now that's too heavy-handed. So I'm going to move this over to about right there. And I'm going to do the same thing with the whites. Now I don't have too much white, so it's not going to be that big a change. But I'm going to say, all right, if you're more than, see, if we move this over a whole lot, it blows it out. Basically, I'm saying if you're more than like 95% white, you bump up to white. And this is called crushing, because now instead of 100 to 100, I have less of a range, and it causes the contrast to be higher. So I think that's kind of a cool look. I may want to desaturate the whole thing again, but rather than go to this one, I'm going to make a new desaturation that is my whole image. And I'm going to desaturate a little bit. Whoa, where'd you go? Where'd you go? I don't mind sometimes leaving mistakes in there because you look back and you're like, what did you do, Ray? And I threw my layers somehow. Where are my layers? No layers match this filter. I don't want that. I double clicked on it and it was like, hey. Okay, that's good. That's fine. Kind. No, name. There we go. I just switched to basically say, only show me the layers that were in that hue and saturation. So that was kind of scary. Don't freak out. Things happen. Here's my new hue and saturation that I just made. I'm going to lower the saturation of my whole image a little bit. Okay, now it's looking like, oh, dude, it's going to storm. There's no people. It's a little creepy. So with just a couple of changes, I'm going to call this one Whole Scene Desat. So I know what that is. Okay. Now it's looking pretty creepy, but we could do a little more to this. This was real popular in the 80s, was like throwing a card in front of the camera that made the whole sky red or something, but that looked pretty crap. So we're not going to do that. Let's open up a new layer on the top. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill this layer in with a color that's sort of creepy. And let's pick like a sort of a dull dark green, maybe like a grayish green, you know, zombie green. And what we're going to do is on this new layer right here, I'm going to grab my old school paintbrush, a paint bucket that's been around since forever, paint. And boop, it's just going to color in that whole screen. And you're like, well, that's ridiculous, RBB. What in the world did you do? I am going to change this. I'm not going to lower the opacity. If I lower the opacity of this layer, all it's going to do is look like my camera is dirty. And it's looking through this green dirty layer, okay? I don't want to do that. What I want this to do is I want every pixel to do some kind of color math with all the things underneath. So I'm going to change the blending mode. So we're on normal right now. This section of blending modes darkens, this section lightens, this section blends. So let's go through them. If I start on darken, I can just hit my down arrow and it will scroll through different ones. Now don't worry if some of these are like, whoa, that's ridiculously heavy-handed. You can always turn it down a little bit. But that's not bad. Color dodge looks kind of cool. Sometimes I'll jot it down like, which one looked cool? Color dodge looked good. Ooh, I kind of like that too. It's a little heavy-handed, but it looks kind of cool. Soft light. Hard light. When you start getting into some of these guys down here, like difference and things like that, they get a little goofy. So I'm going to go back up to, I think it was pin light. Overlay wasn't bad. Lighter color, linear dodge, color dodge. Was it color dodge? That looks pretty good. All right, so color dodge. And if you say, well, what does that look like? I can turn this on and off. And you can see that it sort of like brightened things up because it sort of contrasts the reds, but now it's looking a little creepier. All right, and I can label this one green overlay. It says power lay. That's a whole different video, but you know, I spell things wrong all the time. All right, so now we've got this tinted and it's a little creepier. All right, so that's pretty cool. Other things that we could do with this, and we're getting into 25 minutes, so you're probably getting tired of this, but some other things we could do to this is we could save this. And I would, anytime you get something like, I've gotten a lot of work done, okay, and I've been working on this for a while, I should probably save this. I can go to File, Save As, and save the Photoshop document so that I maintain all my layers in case my computer blows up. The other reason is if I save the Photoshop layer, the Photoshop file, one of the things I can do, which is ultimately destructive, is go up here to Layer, and I'm going to flatten the image. Now, what this does is it's going to throw away all my layers and smash them flat. Watch, these are all going to go away. Terribly destructive, right? Because all my changes are now smashed into one layer. But let's assume that I saved the Photoshop document too. Now I can take this, I'm going to duplicate this background, and I can do some effects to this, okay? So we can do some filters. For example, how about blur? Because when things are totally visible, it's not that scary. So let's blur a little bit. So we're going to blur and Gaussian blur. Okay, and it will give us a little menu here saying how many pixels do you want to blur, and a little sample. Let's blur it a bunch, because what we're going to do, I think that's okay, maybe 2.5 pixels. We'll call that good. So it blurred this whole image, and we don't want that. We don't want it blurry, but we don't want it completely non-blurry. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this blurry layer, let's label it, okay, blurred layer, and I'm going to create a mask on here because I want to work non-destructively, even though I just flattened the whole image. And I'm going to take the blur off where I want people to look. Maybe all my zombies are coming from down here because that's where the bus dropped them off or something. So I don't want the blur to be here, and our eyes will focus on what is in focus. So I'm going to make sure that I'm on my paintbrush. I want to make sure I'm on a soft brush. Oh, that's not a soft brush. Soft brush. My opacity is pretty low because I want to build this up. All right, I'm on black. And what I'm going to do is I am just going to paint in this alpha channel. I'm painting black, which is taking away from the mask, right? You'll see in a second. See, it starts to pop up right there. Okay, all I'm doing is I'm painting black. You're like, RBB, you are not painting black. I am. You'll see it show up right here. See that black? And I am taking away the blurred layer, basically saying, don't look at this spot right here. I'm going to make that a little bigger and a little more opacity just so you can see this a little quicker, because I know y'all got things to do. So by painting on this area here, I have returned this area to focus, and just because that's how our eyes work, we're drawn to this area more. So don't forget all the way up, right? So this whole area is in focus. And you can choose how much is in focus. Maybe this whole half the street is, and only what's close to us is blurred. So this would be sort of a shallow depth of field. This was like F22. We could see the whole city clearly. And now we've lowered it to, I don't know, F7 or something. I'm not a photographer. But now our eye is drawn down here. Okay, so we could do this forever. We could be at this for like an hour, and I'll probably do a couple other videos doing this same kind of thing with some other cool alleys and making them look spooky. But what we've done is we went from that original Mickey Mouse scene, right, to this. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. All right, well, give us a try. Don't be afraid to try some of these tools. And remember that you want to save that Photoshop documents. We can always go back and look at it. If you forget, you could always save this document right here, and then you could always step back a couple times because we haven't done any like major changes. You could step back all the way till you see all your layers come back. So don't panic. All right, well, I hope that was fun. I hope that was cool, and that you can do some cool things, change some of your vacation photos and be like, dude, we were in Germany and there were zombies. It could happen. All right, y'all have a great day. Be well.